Hi, this is Janey, Imaani, and welcome to Emotional Awareness. Okay, so let's have a look at the question that we'll be answering today. I have been thinking about applying for a new position at my firm for the past year, but I have always been afraid of taking risks. How do I push back my fears and get more comfortable with taking this risk? Okay, so let's begin by looking at what the definition of a risk is. Like, what is a risk? So risk is obviously doing something when you don't know what the outcome will be. And if you knew what the outcome would be, then it would no longer be considered a risk. But the thing is that there's a lot of sort of discomfort and vulnerability and anxiety that comes along with taking risk. And so it sounds like what you're trying to say is that you're finding it hard to get over the discomfort, or you're waiting to feel more comfortable before you take the risk. And that's not something that's going to happen, right? Because risk-taking and comfort are mutually exclusive. So according to Brene's research, which is based on 200 pieces of qualitative data and 15 years of research now, is that there was not one example of risk-taking or being courageous with anybody's lives without vulnerability or without that uncomfortable feeling of discomfort, or whatever that you feel. Like, some people feel it in like the pit of their stomach, some people feel sweaty, some people stutter, whatever it is. So if you want to apply for that position, then you're going to have to allow yourself to feel those vulnerable feelings, right? Allow yourself to show up and be seen, even when there are no guarantees, and even if you don't know what the outcome will be. So the vulnerability is something that you will have to stomach in order to go ahead and take this risk. So what we'll do in today's episode is probably look at some of the vulnerability myths, because hopefully that will sort of help you understand what is preventing you from taking the risk that you need to take, so you can actually live the life that you want to live, right? So vulnerability myth number one is that we believe that vulnerability is weakness, right? So we don't want to expose ourselves or put ourselves in vulnerable situations because we're so afraid of criticism, judgment, or blame. And we don't want to put ourselves in these positions where we could be scrutinized or we could be rejected. So you may not put your hand up to ask the question in a meeting, even if you don't know what the answer is, because you're afraid that somebody will think that you look stupid or you should have known the answer. And so so we don't like to take those risks because we don't want to be perceived as vulnerable or stupid or needy or whatever it is. But that's the paradoxical thing about vulnerability, is that vulnerability is actually the most accurate measure of courage, meaning that the bigger the risk is, the more vulnerability or the more courage that it will take for you to actually go ahead and try this. Okay, so vulnerability myth number two is that you think that you can opt out of vulnerability, right? So you think that vulnerability is a choice. And that's not true, because everybody's vulnerable, right? To be alive is to be vulnerable, right? We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know what the outcome is going to be when we take a risk. We don't know how things are going to pan out. And so that's just the nature of how life was created. And so it's not a case of I can be vulnerable and you can't. Vulnerability is something that we can't avoid. And so if you're thinking that by not taking this risk, you're keeping yourself safe somehow, then that's not true. That's one of those sort of weird games that we play in our minds. Okay, so vulnerability myth number three is that we think that we can engineer the uncertainty and the discomfort out of vulnerability or out of risk-taking. And so to take a risk means to be vulnerable, right? It means to be uncomfortable, and it means to feel awkward, and those two come hand in hand. So risk-taking equals anxiety, and you really cannot take the anxiety out of this situation. Vulnerability myth number four is that we think that we should know what the outcome is going to be even before we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. So we kind of want to trust that things are going to work out even before we put ourselves in these vulnerable situations. But when it comes to taking a risk, we have to play with the unknown. We have to live in the uncertainty in the midst of risk-taking. So I say, just go ahead and apply. It's never going to feel like the right time. Okay, so let's do this in a nutshell. If we want to take risks, we cannot run from vulnerability, we cannot run from anxiety, we cannot run from uncertainty. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we cannot have both at the same time. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, follow whatever platform that you're watching on, and I will see you next Wednesday for another episode of Emotional Awareness. Bye!